Okay, so you want to open a restaurant. Find a location, hire a chef, print some menus, watch people line up to eat your food. Simple enough. Americans spent over $1 trillion at restaurants last year alone. Surely there's plenty of room to grab a slice of that. There is, and that's exactly the problem. Roughly 60% of restaurants fail within their first year, and nearly 80% are gone within 5 years. This is not a business people fail at because the food is bad. Most of them fail because of numbers nobody explains to you before you sign the lease. Let's start with the number that should stop every first-time owner cold. The average restaurant operates on a net profit margin of just 3 to 5%. Some fine dining establishments with excellent management might push toward 10%, but that's the exception, not the rule. For every $100 a customer spends on a meal, the restaurant typically keeps somewhere between $3 and $5 after every single cost is paid. That is one of the thinnest margins of any legal business in America, and it means there is almost no room for error. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about before they sign anything. Opening a restaurant costs enormous money before a single plate gets served. A modest full-service restaurant can cost $300,000 to $500,000 just to open, covering lease deposits, kitchen equipment, furniture, initial inventory, and permits. A higher-end concept in a major city can easily run past $1 million before the doors even open. Commercial kitchen equipment alone, ovens, walk-in coolers, ventilation hoods, can represent $100,000 to $200,000 of that number, and almost none of it retains resale value if the business fails. So before a single customer walks in, you're already carrying enormous fixed costs. First, there's rent. Commercial restaurant space typically costs $30 to $100 per square foot annually depending on the market, meaning a modest 2,500 square foot restaurant can carry $75,000 to $250,000 a year in rent alone, due whether the tables are full or empty every single night. Then there's labor, and this is where the math gets brutal fast. A full-service restaurant typically spends 25 to 35% of total revenue on labor costs, kitchen staff, servers, hosts, and management. Minimum wage increases across the country have pushed hourly labor costs up significantly in the last decade, and unlike a factory, you cannot simply automate a chef or a server away without fundamentally changing what you're selling. Then there's food cost, and this is the number every restaurant owner obsesses over. Food cost typically runs 28 to 35% of revenue, meaning if a plate sells for $20, roughly $6 to $7 of that goes directly to ingredients before any other cost is even considered. Combine food cost and labor cost, what the industry calls prime cost, and you're already at 55 to 65% of every dollar spent, gone before rent, utilities, insurance, marketing, or a single cent of profit. Then there's the part almost nobody accounts for in their opening budget, equipment failure, and maintenance. A commercial refrigeration unit failing during a busy weekend can cost $5,000 to $15,000 to repair or replace on an emergency basis, and health department regulations mean you often cannot legally continue serving food until it's fixed. A single walk-in cooler failure overnight can destroy tens of thousands of dollars in inventory in a matter of hours. Now here's the part that explains why so many restaurants that seem busy every night still fail. Being full does not mean being profitable. A restaurant needs to hit a specific break-even point, covering fixed costs like rent, insurance, and management salaries before variable costs like food and hourly labor even factor in, and many owners drastically underestimate how many covers, industry language for meals served, they actually need per night just to break even. A restaurant with $20,000 in monthly fixed costs and an average check of $25 per person might need to serve 800 or more covers a month just to reach zero profit, before counting a single dollar toward actual owner income. Here's the counterintuitive piece. You'd think a restaurant with higher prices and fancier ingredients would have better margins than a casual spot serving burgers. Often, the opposite is true. Fine dining restaurants carry dramatically higher food costs, more specialized labor, and more waste from perishable high-end ingredients, while a well-run fast casual concept with a tight, limited menu can control food cost and labor far more precisely, sometimes generating better margins on a $12 burrito than a white tablecloth restaurant generates on a $60 steak. But even restaurants that survive the first brutal years are not safe from structural risk. In March of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced dine-in restaurants to close or drastically limit capacity almost overnight. An estimated 90,000 restaurants closed permanently or long-term across the United States within the first year of the pandemic alone. Restaurants operating on 3 to 5% margins had essentially zero cushion to absorb months of reduced or eliminated in-person revenue, and many that survived only did so by taking on emergency debt or pivoting entirely to delivery and takeout, channels that often carry lower margins once third-party delivery app commissions, which can run 15 to 30% per order, are factored in. So let's do the actual math on why people keep opening restaurants anyway despite all of this. A well-run restaurant generating $1.5 million in annual revenue at a healthy 8% net margin clears $120,000 in profit for the year, a meaningful return for an owner-operator putting in 60 to 70-hour weeks, but a number that requires near-flawless execution across food cost, labor scheduling, and consistent customer volume every single week to achieve. Drop that margin to the industry average of 3 to 4%, which is far more common, and that same restaurant clears just $45,000 to $60,000 a year, before the owner has paid themselves a salary comparable to a manager's job somewhere else entirely. That gap, between the 8% margin restaurants that make the headlines and the 3 to 4% margin that most restaurants actually operate on, is the entire story of why most restaurants fail. It's rarely about bad food. It's about razor-thin margins meeting rising rent, rising labor costs, and rising food costs, all at the exact same time, with almost no room in the budget to absorb a single bad month, let alone a bad year.